Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for Korean American children and families in early childhood education, research through the Suda approach. This is the first in a two-part webinar series to explore topics raised in the book Supporting Korean American Children in Early Childhood Education, Perspectives from Mother Educators, which was published by Teachers College Press in late 2023. We are fortunate to have with us today the four authors of the book, as well as the forward writer, who will be acting as our moderator today. Very briefly about the book, early childhood professionals can use this one-of-a-kind work to better serve Korean American and other Asian American children in the US. Our authors, who are four transnational mother educators, share their lived experiences of their Korean American children and their families through candid and vivid narratives that counter stereotypical and prejudicial beliefs about these communities. Some housekeeping before I introduce and hand it over to our panel. There is a discount on the book when purchased through us, Teachers College Press. Look to the chat panel where the details on the discount code will be made available. We are recording today, and the recording will be sent to you via email in a few days' time, so please share it with any colleagues who might find it valuable. There will be a Q&A at the end of our hour, so please put your questions in the chat and we'll get to those a bit later. And for our last bit of housekeeping, please check us out, Teachers College Press, at tcpress.com. We have many books and resources for teachers and educational researchers, books in early childhood, multicultural education, and many other topics. So please check us out, follow us on social, or sign up for our list to hear more about our future webinars. This includes the second part of this webinar series, which will be taking place at this time next Thursday, May 23rd. On that occasion, the authors will be joined by Dr. Melissa Scherfinsky for a conversation focused on the implications of their research for teaching and teacher education. The registration for that part 2 will also be dropped in the chat. So please remember to join us for part 2 next week and visit us at tcpress.com. With all that said, I'm very happy to introduce our panel today. The four authors of the book will go into their backgrounds more as part of the conversation, but let me introduce them briefly. Sophia Han is an associate professor in the Department of Curriculum, Instruction, and Learning at the University of South Florida. Jinhee Kim is an associate professor in the Department of Elementary and Early Childhood Education at Kennesaw State University, Georgia. Sohyun Meacham is an associate professor in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at the University of Northern Iowa. And Su-Jeong Wee is an associate professor in the Department of Child and Family Services at California State University, Los Angeles. Finally, we are very fortunate to be joined by Dr. Michelle Salazar Pérez, who will be moderating today. She is the Velma E. Schmidt Endowed Chair for Early Childhood Education and Professor of Early Childhood Studies at the University of North Texas. In her work, Dr. Salazar Pérez uses women of color feminisms to inform her community collaborations, research, and pedagogy. These perspectives not only critically orient her work, but they also foreground the urgency to re-envision the field to support culturally sustaining praxis and programs for minoritized young children. Her past and present scholarship addresses early childhood policy reform, teacher education, and critical qualitative methodologies. She also, of course, wrote the foreword to the book we're discussing today, Supporting Korean American Children in Early Childhood Education, calling it, and this is a quote, a groundbreaking volume that is dynamic in its approach and in what it conveys. So thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Michelle Salazar Pérez.
Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you to all the authors. I'm so honored and feel so privileged to be in this discussion with you and to have been able to read your book and to know you personally and professionally as well. I'm really proud to be a part of this conversation and your community that you've built around this work. So thank you very much for that. When reading the book, I felt so many contributions that were possible from it, implications for pedagogy, for curriculum, for praxis, and just as equally, there's so many important implications for educational research, broadly, and then also especially in early childhood studies. So I was really thrilled to get the invitation to meet with you all today to discuss about the Suda approach, something that you all developed beautifully in the book and have written about in the past as well. So I'm really honored to be able to talk to you about the methodology today and how you've approached this in your book and the contribution it makes to the field. To ground the session today, I was wondering if each of you could share a little bit about why the research topic of Korean American children and families in early childhood is important to you as Korean American early childhood researchers.
Perfect. So before I start, I would also like to take a moment to thank the Teachers College Press to recognize and celebrate AAPI month in May and having this webinar series. And thanks to all the participants who are taking the time out of the day to join us with this conversation. So to begin with, my full name is Sophia Han, and that represents my transnational, transcultural identities that I have. I consider myself as a first-generation immigrant mother who is raising two second-generation Asian American, or specifically Korean American children here in the United States. So from very early on in my career as an emerging academic scholar, I was very much interested in this idea about diversity and multicultural education. And that was the prominent term that was used at the time, multicultural education. So wanted to support and work with early childhood teachers to develop their cultural competencies. How can they support children and families from diverse cultural backgrounds? But at the time, I wasn't really I was more interested in working with like US teachers, like white American teachers, for example. That was my dissertation study. And I think part of that hesitation or worry was at the time, my training, my lessons so far, I was taught that researchers have to bring the objective lens. All the trainings and courses that I took was from this Western philosophical framework that I had to sort of like embrace. And so if I were to go in and study like Korean American children and family, I was worried that people might think that, hey, that's not rigorous enough, that is too personal, or that might even be seen like, oh, that's your problem. So I've been sort of like hovering in the field, but not really delving in. And then time has passed on, and with children growing up, both myself and my kids, we've witnessed a variety of different moments that really puzzled us. Sometimes it might have not been intentional on the questioner's side, but we were asked like, where are you from? And my kids did not know what to say. They were born and they're growing up here. Where am I from? And like, my child one day came home say, hey, we had a discussion about this white and black, races, and I think I am black. And I was like, I don't know how to respond. I did my best, but I wasn't comfortable. And at the time also, there was really no role model I can look up to or consult with. There was no like resources or anything out there that I could check it out. So I was sort of like feeling this like uncomfortable uneasiness, guilt growing. And then, as you all know, the COVID-19 happened, Atlanta shooting happened. All those sort of like, almost became a wake-up call for me. I decided that maybe this is a time I should not shy away anymore, sort of like taking on my identity as an early childhood educator, mother, researcher. This is a time that I should start like studying more, wanting to share this information more, let other people know what the real authentic experiences are about Asian American children and families. So for me, this is almost like coming back full circle. Finally, I am able to talk about Asian American children and families. And I really hope that this could be a little bit of an opening conversation for many other people who are joining us today to, bring this conversation forward.
Maybe next, I will explain about that. This topic is very special to me in both my work as a researcher and personal level as a mother. When I began to research young Korean American peer culture for my doctoral dissertation, at the time, for a long time ago, I had several interviews with a Korean immigrant mother. I still cannot forget one interview. One mother used a salmon cycle, life cycle, as a metaphor to explain her children's position in this society. As you know, salmon are known for returning to their original birthplace to spawn after migrating to the ocean from freshwater. They intuitively know that it is a safe place for their offspring. So similar way, their mother had a concern about her children's possible failure and frustration of this structural discrimination and microaggression from this society. Sadly, she acknowledged that she would prepare for a safety net for their children return to ethnic community in case. Ironically, I have been same position since I have children here, and immediately after Atlanta shooting, where I live now and work now, my first child asked me, mommy, why are ones more important and respected in this society? It was a very challenging moment to me to explain the answer. So the several critical moments, including these example, have resonated with me my role as a researcher, teacher, educator, and mother.
Okay, well, now unmuted. I'm so sorry. Well, in terms of my reason, I have two things to say. In terms of my scholarship, I'm an early literacy researcher and focusing on oral language development of young children. And my scholarship was really heavily influenced by the Reggio Emilia approach. Although I'm Korean, I was heavily influenced by this Italian approach. But back then in my classroom, Reggio-inspired classroom back in Korea, I had a habit of recording and transcribing children's conversation almost every day. So that was actually the influence from the Reggio Emilia approach. However, the actual conversation that I recorded and transcribed and analyzed and interpreted every day, that was actually our children's Suda. And whenever we talked about this conversation transcripts among my, amazing colleagues, that was our Suda. And then after my doctoral study, and when I was actually delving into my own cultural heritage, Suda really came up to me. Yeah, so we want to actually go back to our cultural heritage and then our ontology, our being. And then when this group, we call us Suda group, and this research sisterhood really inspired me to go into our own cultural heritage and then our way of researching things like that. So that was one thing. And then whenever we talked about our life and then our knowledge building, our children's life really was, a major part of our research. And so here's the second one that I was going to talk about, intersectionality lens, because I am married to, proudly married to, amazing African-American scholar who studies a lot of hip hop literacy. Because of that, I have two beautiful AAA children. I call them AAA. Why? Because Asian African-American, so AAA. And I see them as also Korean American, although they are also African American. So when it comes to intersectionality, there is a, some metaphor or some imagination regarding library. If we put Asian American in one section of the library, and then does this book go to African American section as well? So that is a kind of dilemma. But I mean, I wish they are including both sections. So anyhow, our children, in terms of intersectionality perspective, I wanted them to be also included in the major narrative. So those two things are my actually reason.
Okay. So in order to explain why I am interested in this topic, I have to trace back to nearly 2 decades ago when I came to the United States for my doctoral studies. So during this time, my focus was solely on expanding my academic horizons beyond what I had learned in South Korea and contributing to the advancement of early childhood education in my home country. So I approached my stay with a temporary mindset and often felt like an outsider. So by intentionally shutting myself down about cultural and racial issues, I chose to be silent. But over time, I found myself working in a US university and raising 3 wonderful Korean American children. And while working at the university, despite not having formal training in multicultural education, I was assigned to teach courses on diversity because I was the only faculty member of color in my department. However, teaching these courses pushed me to delve deeper into racial and social issues, leading to critical self-reflection as an educator and a parent. And also through my experiences raising my children, I encountered various instances of microaggressions, Asianizations, and white privilege in education settings and communities. One child faced peer ridicule over food, while another experienced cold treatment from a teacher, impacting their confidence and integration. And these experiences sparked a passion within me for advocating against racism and promoting anti-racism education. And I realized that I should not be silent anymore. I believe that silence is a violence, emphasizing the importance of breaking the silence and sharing our stories to challenge societal norms and promote inclusivity.
Thank you all for sharing your really powerful story and embodied knowledges that you bring to this work and to the world through your relationships with your children, your families, each other as a sisterhood. And it can really be felt, the energy of that collectiveness can be felt in the pages of your book whenever I read it. So I really thank you for letting us know about what your personal experience is, professional, and how those really, you know, there's not really a distinction between those. Oftentimes they're meshed together. And so that's why this work, this embodied work, is so important, that it becomes part of the fabric of what we think of as early childhood education, and also our methodologies that we employ. So to that topic, I was wondering about what your feelings were for other researchers in early childhood education and care, and why this topic might be important for them to be able to think about and to engage with.
So that's actually the question that we grappled with a lot in embarking on this journey. It matters so much to us. We can, like, say this is it, but how can we, share this message to others? So we actually thought about a couple of reasons or factors, I would say. First one is the growing population. Like in the United States, if any of you are interested in just like doing a quick search, like in the Pew Research Center, like surveys and things like that, you will find out that Asian Americans are actually the fastest growing population in the United States. Over the past 2 decades, it actually surpassed the growth rate than Hispanic population. And they're projecting that it's going to grow, rapidly in the next couple of decades. And also, I know that there's a lot of different verbiages that are used, Asian American Pacific Islanders, but some of the more inclusive terms says Asian American, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. So if you bring in this Native Hawaiian population, which also has a lot, subgroups, the numbers are only going to, grow. So all of this to say that this is no longer a small group that we can say, oh, we don't really need to care. You can just stay there and not being recognized or valued. So number one, I think the population growth from here on really is, vouchering us for us to say, hey, we need to think about it. This is something that we need to care about. And along that line, one of the other reasons is AAPI community oftentimes have been described as just one thing. Like it's a very monolithic thing. Like, Asians are like this or Asians are like that. All this like stereotypical images when we say like Asians are model minorities, they're smart, they're behaving good, or, they are at the same time perpetual foreigners. Where are you from? You get this famous question all the time. And like quiet, like invisible outsiders. Those images all sort of portray as one thing, which is so problematic. So, again, Asian Americans actually trace back more than like 20 different countries of origin. They all bring very unique historical, like immigration history, language, culture, like each community is so unique. So we also want to be very careful. The 4 of us here, we share Korean American heritage. And that's why we were actually being very specific, even in the title of the book. It is Korean American story. We didn't want to overgeneralize that we are Asian Americans. But at the same time, there's no way, we want to be very careful to reiterate that we are not claiming that we represent all Asian American communities at all anyways. So we hope that this could be just like, again, we are delving into one ethnic group that we both live in. We can share the lived experiences, but this is only to be, asking for more conversation and actually more interdisciplinary, as So mentioned, the intersectionality, interdisciplinary conversation to come. And one last reason, I think it's also really important for us to, kind of like share. Majority of the prior research about Asian American children or AAPI communities have been largely carried out in the field of developmental psychology, which have been, looking into certain types of children's development, children's behaviors or parenting strategies. And obviously that is not a problem in and of itself, but we've seen that oftentimes those studies, researchers have adopted this Western-centric epistemology. They were conducted by cultural outsiders. And so by almost like default, you end up sharing limited information. So I think we believe early childhood researchers research the field can benefit really from having a more culturally responsive, sustainable, critical, authentic approach that could share more nuanced understandings of children and families from Asian American communities. I think I can stop here.
Does anybody else have a contribution to add? Yes, thank you, Sophia. Those are all really important points that you make, and that this is for everyone to be learning about and understanding the everyday lived experiences of Korean American peoples, and that it's an entry point as well. This book serves as an entry point to continue to grow and to learn more, and to be a part of the advocacy that we have for culturally sustaining practice for young children. So thank you very much for your contribution. We were wondering as well about the Suda approach and knowing a little bit more about how it's been conceptualized, how you have taken it on as embodied methodology, both in your everyday life and also as a research form of practice. So,
Great. Yes, now we get to go deeper into Suda and the Suda approach for our research, especially because some people ask me about this, and then I really was talking about if you know Suda and then you see how the our Suda is theorized in early childhood education. So that was my selling point for today. So I'm so excited now. Okay, so if you were to literally translate Suda, it would mean an intense and excessive chat. But that doesn't quite capture its essence. It's a unique way of having a conversation that's been a part of Korean culture for decades. You can find it in TV shows, movies, YouTube channels, and books covering topics like politics, academics, beauty standards, and more. If you're familiar with K-cultural phenomena like BTS, the movies like Parasite or Minari, or the Netflix series Squid Game, or The Glory, these days I heard that, Korean bully, what is that? Like, it's really, in TikTok land right now. So if you know about those, you can add Suda to your list of things to know now. And if you're a cultural insider and Suda is part of your life and being, you will see how we have theorized Suda for our theoretical framework and research methodology in studying about, for, and with Korean American children and their families. In our research, we argue that Suda is both a theoretical and methodological foundation. It's a concept that sustains our culture because it's a natural part of life for Koreans and Korean Americans. As Korean women and academics, it feels really completely natural to us. In academia, where Western theories and scholarship are more common, we feel it's our responsibility to normalize and humanize our cultural heritage by theorizing Suda. So in terms of characteristics of Suda, Suda is social, Suda is therapeutic. Suda is a way of sharing wisdom. Suda is a key part of Korean women's cultural identity. But still, Suda is for everyone. Even though it originally referred to Korean women's feudal chatting, now it really symbolizes women's emancipation for us because we humanized it further, influenced by many feminist or humanist scholars. In our published articles that used Suda, we explained in simpler terms that it helps us to see our shared experiences as Asian American mother educator, researchers, and whatever that we tag on us. From a Bakhtinian perspective on dialogue, we see Suda as truly dialogic. Major scholars like Eugene Matusov about Bakhtinian perspective, he emphasizes the idea of being ontologic rather than using dialogue as a tool. So Suda is not about achieving preset goals. It's more about being ourselves. It's the essence of our research process. And then now Jinhee is going to talk about, how it is going to be, relevant to other cultures like Latin cultures or African-American cultures, something like that. So sister circles or platicas, something like that.
Okay, as you know, Dr. Sohyun Meacham explained well about what is Suda and what is its characteristic Suda. So we see that Suda has a contribute to decolonizing global North perspective, which are a white European male dominant center perspective. And then we see, we view Suda as defying traditional role, welcoming all community members into profound conversation and respecting conversant as individuals who have their own voices rather than predominant, feeding them into the predetermined role, such as a speaker, listener, or any other authority in a specific topic. And so Suda really challenged that traditional focus group dynamic where the interviewer has his or her authority and then participants are merely, as informants. So Suda really open up the conversation possibility for researchers to, truly listen participants' story. At the same time, participant is really participate in a collaborative research. So we see the Suda as an ally with what other feminists have sought in sharing voices, seeking voices, especially for marginalized group within an asset-based lens and community. Suda has connecting to other cultural contexts and in the setting. So, for example, we see that Suda can be connecting to platicas as a Chicana, Latina culturally responsive methodology grounded in the small talk. In both Suda and platicas contribute to building a respectful space to share their voice of cultural community. Even small talk has been really, especially by women, marginalized group, has been considered insignificant. However, we see that through that Suda lens, we see small work talk have been really a powerful tool to create their own agency and voices. And we can see that from researcher perspective can find out nuanced voices in the community. The other one is we can connecting to a kitchen table talk, symbolize the center of home and place where women in particular work and communicate with each other. So scholar mentioned that kitchen table talk has been described as safety place and place for the deliberation and dialogue for Black people navigating the complex of their life experiences. So these are considerable similarity between the Suda and other cultural practice actually taken for granted, but people may not know. But we hope that more methodology are like the kind of a decolonizing methodology perspective can be more found out by more people. Yeah. So that is that we see the connection and a uniqueness of Suda.
Thank you, Jinhee. And so I really appreciate how you talked about Suda as a decolonizing methodology. And in writing my foreword after reading your book, I saw so many connections and alignments, parallels with the notion of theories in the flesh, with Moraga and Ansel Dua's ideas around Chicano feminism and how theory and methodology can emerge from our lived experiences, from our spirit, from our collectiveness, from our what might seem as mundane moments, times in our lives, conversations that we have that are really actually powerful spaces where we communicate with each other, sometimes not even verbally, but in other ways, our cultural ways of being, our intuition, and how we support each other, our struggles, our points of empowerment. And what I think is really one of the many important things about it is how we then connect that to the larger we. So when we have these collective spaces among each other that might be smaller, they're always connected to the larger sphere, the social sphere. And it reminds me as well, when you make connections across Chicana feminism's table talks, how Patricia Hill Collins always encourages coalition building across our identities and our communities. And I see Suda as another potential to find ways to connect across many of our different cultural ways of being that can often be minoritized, even though we are the majority of the global world. So I really appreciate what Suda can give in that, and also to people who are searching for something, students, scholars, in educational and early childhood studies, who want a methodology and a theory to find that they connect to in very embodied ways. And so Suda, I see that as another gift to people who are coming in through the academy that might not feel always welcomed in the academy. And also research, right, that can create deficits in how we think about children of color. And with your work with Korean and Korean American children, how Suda will move us in different directions to challenge deficits and center the brilliance of Korean and Korean American children and families. So I really appreciate your contributions to continuing to grow the literature, the space for people to be welcomed into this form of being. So in that way, I wonder if you could talk about some studies that you might have conducted that were using the Suda approach.
So, so the four of us, we call our, Suda team, we've sort of took on the courage to, kind of use this in place, right? So we theorized this idea. So let's try to, see what we can study with this. So we've done a few projects together, multiple projects actually. So I'm just going to start with one and the rest of us will sort of add on. So one of the most, I guess, major and very proud accomplishment is certainly this book from the Teachers College Press. And I know that it is from the early childhood series. And I believe it was one of the first ones that is focusing on Asian American and Korean American population. So in that book, well, we still we perceive it as a research, but it's written because it's a book, not a journal manuscript. We try to, make it a lot more reader friendly, especially for teachers in the field as well. So in the book actually is a result of Suda researching amongst us, like early childhood educators, teacher educators, mothers, researchers. We wear multiple hats, and we actually did the numbers, and we were over 100 years of experience that we are collectively bringing from all these different parts of the country. So bringing that, we talked about different parental ethnotheories, what type of parental ethnotheories, beliefs, practices that we bring. And the goal was to dismantle this, narrow stereotypes or single narrative about what is good parenting for young children. So we shared some of those findings. We also looked at how our children were going through or experiencing transnaming and translanguaging. I know I said something about my own trans naming or transcultural identities and names early on, and all of our children were, experiencing those, and they were actually able to navigate. They knew when to use what and why, and they had their own reasonings, and they valued their, trans language, trans namings. So that was another piece. We also should look at children's picture books. Like, what are some picture books out there that are portraying Asian American children? What trends and issues do we see? And we also wanted to provide some list of recommended books that teachers can use and some suggested ideas, which we'll talk more about in the next webinar. But that was the part. And also, overall, the purpose of the book, I think we thought was it could be a mirror for ourselves, that we are reflecting on our past experiences and what we see. But also, we really wanted this book to be sort of the window for other people to see what is occurring in this community. And even further, it could serve as this glass door, sliding glass door. I'm using the bishop's image of like sliding glass door for some people to sort of like join us together in this sort of an activism approach. We need to advocate, and in order to advocate, we first need to share, listen to the stories and listen to each other's stories and know what that really is, so that we can build that alliance to move things forward. So that's one of the really exciting things that we've done together, and many more to come.
Thank you so much. I was curious to know as well, other early childhood researchers that might be interested in the Suda approach. What kind of advice would you give about being able to implement it into practice, and then also learning more about Suda?
Okay, yeah, we initially introduced some more research projects that we conducted together, but I will move on to how can other EC researchers apply the Suda. So although Suda has existed for a long time in Korea, we have utilized it as an original research method. So this transition was possibly only because we reflected on our own cultural backgrounds to make a difference in research methods by decolonizing autoethnographical methods and seeking out research methods that are culturally relevant to us. So like us, a growing number of educational researchers are trying to move away from Western-centric views of scientific research, and our utilization of Suda can be one of the examples, leading the paradigm shift, seeking more culturally sensitive and responsive approaches. So the Suda approach stands as a testament to the incorporation of culturally grounded and sustaining methods aimed at challenging dominant Western colonial perspectives within early childhood education discourses to better understand children from diverse backgrounds. But we acknowledge that it is not an easy task for Western researchers to comprehend or practice Eastern or Asian theory or philosophy. And we do not claim that researchers outside Korean culture fully adopt Suda as a research method. Rather, we suggest that they can reflect upon characteristics of the Suda, such as open-endedness regarding conversation topics rather than a rigid or protocoled interview, and non-hierarchical conversation environments, allowing lengthy and deep emotional storytelling of conversations and empathetic listening. And so, for example, beyond the Suda approach, other strategies are rooted in Asian traditional beliefs, including Buddhisms, Confucianisms, Taoism, and Hinduisms, can further contribute to a more inclusive and culturally diverse educational discourse. These approaches collectively enrich the educational landscape by offering alternative perspectives and providing a necessary counterbalance to the prevailing Western-centric views that have historically dominating early childhood education practices. So the recognitions and the integration of diverse cultural perspectives not only foster more inclusive and effective learning environments, but also affirm the experiences and values of Asian American children within the educational framework. So again, we strongly encourage researchers to seek for their unique, culturally responsive and sustaining and decolonizing research approach reflecting their cultural backgrounds.
Thank you. You speak so much to the nuances and the complexities, the tensions, and all the considerations that should go into engaging with embodied methodologies, and how somebody can be thinking about ways in which their own cultural backgrounds can find alignment to push back on the Western canon of how we do methodology in early childhood studies. I really appreciate the complexity and how you explained what we can be thinking about in terms of Suda for folks who have not been able to learn about it as much until now. I wanted to circle back a little bit to what the Suda approach helped you to learn or find out about Korean American children and families in early childhood education. If there's other kinds of examples that you might be able to provide before we go to our Q&A.
I can start if you don't mind, Jinhee or Su-Jeong, but I can add a research that we have conducted very recently. It was about well, play-based family literacy, which we call PBFL. So it is a new term. Okay, so please memorize it. PBFL, like play-based family literacy. Okay. So in our study, we looked at how Korean American children engage in translanguaging play-based family literacy, which is PBFL again, at home during the COVID pandemic. And because it was like more informal situation, informal setting, and in home, so Suda was really major, tool. I mean, I don't like the tool, but Suda was the context. Let's say the context is better word. So Suda was their learning context during the COVID pandemic period, and that time, well, we found that Suda was actually an innovative research tool. At the same time, it was their learning ontology for children. And when we actually looked into their learning ontology through Suda, and they were talking a lot about some, sensitive issues regarding racial observation out there, and someone so and so said something, some racial slurs or all kinds of things were really naturally shared, especially in the context of COVID. So, well, we realized that our study was showing that Suda was a really powerful tool for hearing the voices of Korean American children. They are often overlooked in play literacy or family literacy research out there because, it's, I mean, no research out there, no literature out there that is published. So Suda's strength lies in, its openness, open-endedness, like Su-Jeong already talked about, and allowing conversations to flow more naturally without any predefined roles or topics. And so this approach really respects each participant, child participant as an individual, and then making it more applicable across all different cultures and research areas too. And also, our findings show that PBFL gave children the freedom to express their voices on social issues through various literacy formats. So we were talking about, well, TikTok posting or more art-related expression, or poetry or book club conversation, all of those. So by using Suda, we could listen to these voices more carefully, and then we believe that early literacy researchers should rethink their approaches to better hear the voices of minoritized children. And Suda really helps researchers engage deeply with participants' perspectives, and promoting a holistic understanding and avoiding hierarchical relationships that are often observed in regular classroom settings.
Yeah, I will add one more research project. So another study we conducted together using Suda was titled Being Asian American Children and Children's Exploration of Racial and Cultural Identity and Racism. And this piece was published at Race, Ethnicity, and Education journals last year. And in this study, we explored Asian American children's emerging ideas of racial identity and experience of racism through multimodal representation during the COVID-19 pandemic. So identifying and examining racial identity can be very challenging, especially to young children. But Suda allowed us to explore our children's perceptions of their racial identity. So we believe that Suda serves as a perfect tool to capture our children's stories of racial identity and experiences of racism, not only because Suda is a culturally sustained method, but because children may not share such sensitive topics with unfamiliar others, such as researchers or interviewers in a formal settings. But unlike an interview, which typically has prescribed questions based on the research topic, Suda allows for the natural conversation with the children at home and enabling us to naturally enter children's worlds. So our children explore what surrounds them, ranging from their bodies, their skin colors and hair textures, and also classroom materials, what are there, what are not there. And there are two passports, one issued in the Korea and the other one issued in the United States, using these tangible artifacts and to their family origins. So it showed the children's thinking process and ideas that can be presented through the various multimodal representations rather than being restricted to verbal expressions. So what we learned from this study is what is needed to our children is not a definite answer from adults using a didactic approach, but provide the space and time to think over and make meaning through Suda and various mediums that they choose and feel comfortable with.
Yes, thank you so much for those examples that you gave. I can think of all the different ways. I felt like I was in the room with you as you were working with communities and doing this important work. So I really see how Suda's this invitation to invite people to come and share their stories of lived experiences through all of these different multiple modalities that could be possible, that wouldn't be possible actually otherwise. So thank you so much for sharing these really important insights. We're going to move a little bit to the question and answer session. And we had something asked a little while ago that I believe you may have touched on the first part of the question, but you may want to expand on it. And also a lot of appreciation for your vulnerability, your openness to share your journeys. Both of immigration and also your everyday experiences in the academy and beyond. So we've got a lot of gratitude coming through in the Q&A box. So I wanted to share that as well. So one person asked, they're wondering about how other groups of pan-ethnic Asian immigrants, Asian Americans, such as Chinese immigrants, and also let's see, how would you engage with solidarity with people of color as well? So that's in addition to. So that was one part of the question. And then what's your vision of it moving forward as an approach?
May I answer about that? Because we are talking about already the similarity, uniqueness of Suda with connection with other cultural setting methodology. So like, for example, practicas, kitchen table talk, and other, maybe in not limited in Asian culture, but it's all, marginalized group culture may have their own unique, powerful, their cultural practice that can make their own members' voices. So I think that is find out that to each other and support each other, it can be contribute the solidarity for all group.
Thank you. We have another thank you for sharing your fascinating research method and wondering about the size of group that Suda is used in, and if relationships are created in the process or if those in the group already knew each other really well.
I think probably I can answer this question. Well, you know, there's no golden number. But you know, if it becomes too big, like I don't see myself really engaging in Suda too much if it's like more than 7 or 8 people. Although probably I would do kind of small sub Suda group chat here and there. Probably that happens in any, you know, informal conversation situation or party situation in any culture, right? And if it is only one-to-one, it is also possible in terms of, you know, Suda. But hierarchy situation is, I think, more important to think about if there is like really power differential or hierarchical differential, probably can be hard to achieve the pure Suda. Although it is still possible to engage in, you know, in-depth conversation about their lived experiences and things like that. But our group has been 4 or 5 many times, and then sometimes 3, especially for the research situation, research methods. But in our family, if our children are engaged in Suda with the family members, it becomes a little smaller sometimes because 2 or 3 people, or if it is a dinner situation, dinner Suda situation, probably 4 or 5, including all of you know, family members and things like that. So it really varies. I think everyone needs to really find out what can be a great number for them, and then that can be a good research topic. And another thing, if the relationships are created in the process, or if those in the group already know each other well, perhaps if people already know each other well, then, you know, achieving real, you know, optimal Suda situation can be easier. But even if you just happen to meet someone like right there, and perhaps like a lot of other culture people, probably they don't, you know, think that is possible. But, you know, after you say, how are you? And then you talk about how you are actually doing in your life, and then, you know, start talking like 10 minutes at least, or 20 minutes to speak about your life situation. If you are not really doing well, you know, probably people from other cultures, probably they are going to be overwhelmed. Ooh, I didn't really need that information, too much information, or something like that. But that is still possible, you know, among Korean people with their cultural heritage that uses Suda even with, you know, people who don't know each other so well. Especially we call them like more Ajuma culture, like kind of middle, you know, middle-aged women who can engage in Suda very easily with, you know, the people that they don't know each other well. But, you know, well, we kept talking about, like, especially for the research methodology, perhaps if there's a report already established, it can be a little easier or faster to get into the Suda status. I hope that it answered the question.
Yes, yeah. I think there's not one way, definitely, but then there's so many commonalities between how something can emerge. And I feel that way about pláticas as well. Sometimes it's everything you described, I can definitely relate to in that sense. So we have another question where someone is sharing their doctoral experience and having mentors who are Korean, and naturally, you know, something becoming a Suda time that was originally started off maybe not so much, but then evolved into that. And so this really gave the person their opportunity to listen, the mentor to listen without judging. So this person saw this as a healing process for them, and they're wondering if you've observed any psychological effects of Suda, such as promoting mental health for parents, teachers, and children.
I can take this first step. I think the question is really, you know, interesting and almost perfect, because with this, you know, work that we've been doing, we actually were able to connect with the original, like, you know, sort of the Suda, what do we call her? Like the initiator, like the, you know, she's a feminist, a sociologist, you know, back in South Korea. And when we connected with her, what she shared with us is, hey, you know what? this, Suda's effect on mental health, counseling, those things are already occurring. Those were already taking place in South Korean context. She was actually inspired by our sort of effort to connect it to education piece, to working with young children and working with families. So to answer the question in short, the answer is yes. I think that is already sort of like taking place in terms of like applying the Suda approach to facilitate mental health and counseling and that human relationship enhancement.
Thank you. We have another question asked to hear about the power of telling multiple stories to defy the single story about Asian Americans. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question one more time for us?
Yeah. So Lin asked to hear about the power of telling multiple stories to defy the single story of Asian Americans. So you talked about not being monolithic, which can happen in a lot of the ways that the census and other entities will put us into boxes. So I believe that this is what they're speaking about, is defying these single stories about a particular culture. And this person mentions Asian Americans. And so what are your thoughts about this generally?
I think, okay, that's a good question, very tough one, because I think one of the things that we also thought and we struggle with is underrepresentation. When you don't have enough, I think there's only so much you can work with. And so the idea about, any story or anything that we, share, again, it cannot be generalized with everyone, but it is a lived experience from a group or a group of people. And so I hope that our, sharing some of our vulnerabilities, some of our lived experiences, ourselves and our children, all of those are not intended to portray anything as a set in stone thing, but really an invitation for more of those to come. So I sometimes use this analogy to my students when I teach. We only see one thing and that's all you see and that's all you go with. That's your frame of reference. You have to have more than one, or you have to have multiple to compare and contrast and make sense and not to be stereotypical. So in order for us to not to be stereotypical, at least there has to be something out there. And I think so far, the sort of argument that we would like to make is this overarchingly Asian American population, again, very diverse, very diverse group, but Asian American in general has been very underrepresented, very much understudied. So I think that is the small sort of like wish or goal that we hope that early childhood researchers, whether you belong to this group or not, we can have different roles and different heads and different perspectives we bring, but to sort of like dig out of that underrepresentation issue to begin with, so that we can bring about more, I guess, dynamic conversation.
If I add something to this, well, someone asked about, well, I forgot about it, but if I add something to this, because we don't see a lot of stories, it becomes single story. So the more stories that are told, I think, we can make this a lot more diverse, rich stories all together, so that we can avoid single stories. Yes. Well, I'll come back to something that I saw on the chat. Sorry.
That's okay. We can find that, and as well, it is 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock where you are in Eastern time, and different times around the world. So I wanted to ask Emily if it was time to say goodbye, or if we might have some time for other questions. So Emily, what do you think?
I think maybe we can do one more question before we say goodbye this evening.
Okay.
I just found one that I wanted
Okay,
to.
great.
Perfect.
Okay, yes, so go ahead.
Yeah, Jenna asked about this, if this book is intended more for non-Koreans or Koreans as well. For example, what would Korean educators get out of this book who already knows about Korean culture? Well, thank you so much for this question. I appreciate that. And then again, circling back to what we were talking about, avoiding single stories. You will see a lot of different stories even though you're a Korean American, or even though you're Korean, so you are so you know, in the culture, so you're a cultural insider, but still you have a lot to hear from other people who are in the culture. For instance, even though you're Korean American, probably you might not know a whole lot of stories from, you know, mixed heritage children, mixed heritage families. And then we include that kind of narrative. And also we talk about all the different stories in different regions, because we are from Florida, we are from Georgia, we are from Illinois. Well, I'm from Iowa, but if we look back on our trajectories in the United States, we have lived in a lot of different states. I can't remember the exact number, but because we moved here and there as well. So we actually talk about all those experiences from different states of the United States, and then different, lived experiences with other people, interacting with other people, something like that. So, even though you know a lot of Korean culture that you have subscribed to, you have, been in, but still you have a lot to probably learn from us, or feel connected to more. So if we define learning in a different way, it is not necessarily getting information to other people. It is more like engaging conversations, and then making more depth in terms of our discourse. So hope that is helpful or useful.
Yes, thank you so much, So, for explaining all of the different ways that this work is so important for everybody to be engaging with and learning about and reading about. And I want to express also my gratitude. I see so much gratitude coming through in the comments, and the heart connections that I think so many people had with your dialogue today, your discussions, your Suda that happened in this space itself. And I want to thank you again for being able to be a part of it. And I can't wait for the next session that's coming up. And I believe Emily will share a little bit more about that in closing. But yes, thank you so much for everybody who came, and to please spread the word, because this is something that I know I'm very excited to share with all of my colleagues, students, friends outside of academia. I think it's something that's great for the world to be able to see and know and read.
Well, that's a wonderful note to end it on. Thank you all for your insights and your time this afternoon. This was a wonderful conversation, and as Dr. Salazar Pérez said, we have a very lively, wonderful chats. We thank our attendees for being sharing their insights and being so engaged with us this afternoon. We do have a second part to this webinar next Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Please join us for that. Please remember there's a discount on the book. You will receive that in the follow-up email containing this recording. So we hope to see you there. And thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.